Hello, Penelope's going to help me today. We're going to do a little bit of anatomy work, and I want to talk about the sacrum, and I want to talk specifically about SI injuries because mine flared up, and I wanted to show you a few things you could do if you're trying to move your body, practicing yoga or otherwise, and you have SI pain. So the SI joints are where the pelvis, this is the back of the pelvis, on either side attaches to the sacrum. The sacrum is the bottom part of the spine. It's a bunch of fused vertebrae right above the tailbone. And there's an attachment in there with ligaments. Ligaments are supposed to be a little bit stretchy, but not a lot stretchy. And usually an SI injury is when those ligaments have gotten overstretched. It makes the sacrum and the pelvis unstable relative to each other. And while that doesn't sound like too bad a thing, hurts like hell. It's very hard to get up from lying down. It's hard to lie down. It's hard to roll over in bed. It's hard to carry things. It's quite painful. Once you've had an SI injury, even if you get it stabilized, doing certain things can aggravate it and cause you to have that SI injury again. So shoveling snow, carrying heavy things in front of you repeatedly, like when I'm gardening, if I have bags of topsoil, I'm going to put them on my shoulder rather than hold them out in front of me. And also certain yoga positions can aggravate it. So I taught a class a couple weeks ago for the duration of a week that really set things off, and I was in quite a bit of pain. So I wanted to show you some of the things that I do that help me recover from that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is creating hip extension while standing up. So hip extension is where the back of your pelvis and the back of your thigh get closer together. So if I took my leg back behind me but kept my pelvis upright, I'm in hip extension. But what helps with SI injuries is if I put a block at the top of my thighs to really keep my thighs pressed into each other, and instead of taking my legs back, I'm going to try and tip my pelvis back. Now, I am not arching my back. I'm actually keeping my ribs in, but I'm getting the top of my pelvis to tip backward. It's not going to go far, and I come upright. When I tip backward, when I go into hip extension, those two sides of my pelvis come in toward each other, and my sacrum actually moves forward toward the front of my body. That actually helps stabilize that area. So if you take that, I don't even want to call it a back bend, it's a back hinge at the hip joint. You can do those repeatedly. You don't have to have a block. Sometimes if I'm washing dishes, I'll just stop for a moment and just holding onto the sink, do a few of them. I still want to squeeze my thighs in toward each other because that helps. So that's one of the things you can do kind of anywhere you are, is just taking that hinge backward, trying to get the pelvis to tip back. Some other things that you can do, however, you might need cushioning on the floor. You might not be able to do it just anywhere. One of them is a combination of actions that you do while you're kneeling. This is called kneeling mountain. My pelvis and thighs are in the same plane, relatively speaking, to each other. They're in a neutral position. I'm going to take the block, I'm going to put it at the top of my thighs again so that I can squeeze the block. And I'm going to try and hinge backward. Now I'm not arching, I'm keeping my ribs pulled in, and I'm squeezing the block, and I'm trying to keep a straight line. If you curl your toes under, it's a little more weight on your toe joints, but you may find you can go back farther. I don't go back very far. But again, this creates a similar squeezing in at the top of the pelvis in the back and the sacrum pushing forward a little bit, which helps bring those ligaments back into an appropriate size. You can take that a step further and add a little extra effort to it if you want. So if you were to sit towards your heels and come up, it's what I call suspended virasana. If you were to sit a little bit and then try and find that same hinge you were just in and come upright, sit and then hinge and come upright. So I'm not sitting and then popping my thighs forward and arching back. I'm sitting and trying to find that same hinge I was just in. You can work that way. Doesn't matter to me which one you want to do. If you have trouble with that second one, come back to this. This is a great place to work. And the last place I would use as a recovery bit of work for an SI injury could be working in bridge. So this time I'm going to put the block between my knees. You lie down on your back, you want your feet close to your butt, press your shoulders into the floor, press your feet into the floor, and lift up. And you'll notice this is a very similar shape to the one you were just making, kneeling, or rather I was just making, trying to find that straight line, trying to use my thighs to lift up. And as I do that, the back of my pelvis comes in toward, the two sides come in toward each other a little bit, sacrum pushes forward. So those are all recuperative poses. But then if I'm in the middle of trying to create a practice for myself, some things I'm going to avoid: child's pose, a lot of forward folding, whether standing or seated, especially if your legs are close together. Farther apart doesn't seem to be quite as hard on the pelvis, on the sacrum. So I'm going to avoid a lot of the forward folds. And even if I'm going to curve sideways, I'm going to try really hard to keep my pelvis level. I don't want to shift my hips out and do funky things in the back of the pelvis. So I'm going to keep my pelvis steady and stable if I were to curve to the side or curve to the other side. I don't want to let a lot of movement happen here. Be conscious of movements. Try moving gently in different directions, seeing how far you can go. So as I'm recovering, it feels okay. I'm going to spend a little time not bending too far forward. I can go about that far today. Maybe I could go a little farther, but I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to do a ton of poses. I'm just going to do mostly my recuperative ones and some breathing, maybe a twist. Anyway, play with some of those recuperative exercises. See if they help you if you're dealing with an SI injury. And that's what I've got for you. Go.